Welcome, ladies, non-binaries, and gentlemen, to my video at the National Capital Trolley Museum. I wrote this book. It's called Washington Metropolitan Subway, History and Alternate History. Introduction. Everybody loves the iconic Washington Metro, ladies, non-binaries, and gentlemen, but less iconic is the streetcar, which is such a well-kept secret that few know of its existence, and even fewer ride it, mostly because the bus on the same road is faster and goes more places. Which is why, after hardly a decade of operation, Mayor Bowser is already looking to replace it with fancy buses. History repeats itself. History repeats itself. To learn from the demise of DC's first round of streetcars, consider what's the best place to hide a secret. With a bit of digging around the surviving streetcar cities, we can often find the answer underground, as a subway where buses can't go. The district's wide boulevards are ideal for cut and cover, but the closest they ever got was a failed 1944 proposal. Too little, too late. In order to answer the question of what if the Washington Metro began in the 1920s instead of the 70s, I hopped in my time machine to the 1910s to ask it. The rest of this history is a work of non-fiction in the alternate timeline's perspective. Chapter 1. Beginning. In the early 20th century, streetcars carried the development of every city in the world, but all of them had the same problem. They were victims of their own success and got stuck in traffic. Even in the 1890s, congestion was so bad that passengers joked they would get to their destinations faster by walking atop the roofs of the trolleys than by riding them. The subway was invented in 1897 to make trolleys faster, and Philadelphia built one in 1906. In DC, as plans were being drawn to replace the crumbling aqueduct bridge over the Potomac, 5 streetcar and interurban companies jointly established the Washington Metropolitan Subway Company and started digging. The Key Bridge opened on January 17, 1923, with road traffic on the upper level and rail on the lower level leading to the new subway. At the crack of dawn, the inaugural westbound streetcar from Seat Pleasant crossed Benning Bridge and went beneath the ground at Oklahoma Ave for the first time, packed with over 40 commuters, reporters, dignitaries, and trolley enthusiasts, including one who had also ridden the first subway car in 1897. President Harding himself boarded the train at White House Station. With 20 stations about a quarter mile apart, future subways would space the street stations much wider than the original. The subway also included a spur to a portal in front of Union Station with an underground turning route beneath it, and in Georgetown, another portal allowed Maryland trolleys access to the subway. Though trains in service stopped using it in the early 1950s when the Tenleytown line was finally finished, Georgetown's M Street portal still exists, and it is used every night by track work machines. Union's portal, on the other hand, was eliminated with an extension in 1961 to the stadium. The tunnel was temporarily closed in April 1923 due to flooding, but it was by all means successful at making trolleys faster, so for the rest of the decade, streets all over the district were being excavated. It is called grade separation, which refers to the elimination of street running rather than level crossings. An interurban line in its own right-of-way may still have level crossings, but it is only considered grade separated when it is connected to the subway without street running. For example, a few new stations in the summer of 1923 finished grade separating the existing Seat Pleasant branch, but the WB&A main line was fully considered grade separated in 1928 with a tunnel in downtown Baltimore. One motivation for extending the subway was to get underneath the aesthetic ban on trolley wires in historic districts, requiring costly and unreliable conduits for power. Chapter 2. Stations. Every station has patriotic murals on the platform side walls. Originally, professional artists were commissioned to paint these murals, but to save money they were soon replaced with the art classes from nearby high schools. The content of the murals served as a barometer to the definition of patriotism over time. For example, many stations from the late 60s feature anti-war imagery. Before all the station entrances, at hundreds of stations across 3 states, stands an obelisk 8 feet tall, evoking the Washington Monument. At the top is a lantern, and on the side is the simple abbreviation the Metropolitan Subway's network is commonly called, Metro. For the first few decades, Metro stations were built with low platforms for compatibility with the surface streetcars. But as those became less common, new stations were built with high platforms for interurban cars, which were fitted with railroad-style trapdoors to use low platforms too. Station track beds were gradually excavated to raise the platforms, until the last low platforms were finally raised in 2002, so the most recent generations of railcars have not needed trapdoors. Handicap accessibility is still a work in progress, and it may be done as soon as the end of the 2030s. Chapter 3. Depression. The Great Depression certainly hit transit hard, but fans speculate that if there was no metro, it would have been much worse. The Great Falls line was abandoned past McLean, the Bluemont branch reduced passenger service, the Mount Vernon line was already gone, and the WB&A sold its South Shore branch to the B&O, who de-electrified it and still uses part of it for a few freight trains a week. There are now advocacy groups dedicated to returning passenger service to the Annapolis South Shore branch, as the North Shore branch is a much longer 2-seat ride via Linthicum Junction. No new grade separation projects were started between 1929 and 1935 until President Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration ordered construction to resume, and thousands of engineers and laborers found employment digging subway lines, but they did not get around to finishing the already underway subway to Tenleytown. Somehow, Despite the economic downturn, the later years of the Depression were a time for rolling stock innovations, with the debut of both the PCC streetcar for surface routes and the experimental electroliner for longer routes, the latter modified from an order by the Chicago North Shore Line. Chapter 4. War. Automobiles had started becoming prevalent in the 1920s, and already they were becoming a threat to rail. However, as the old saying goes, war is good for business. During the war, the Metro saw a massive boost in ridership due to fuel rationing, but a pause in grade separation activity as the construction workers went off to fight. So the Tenleytown subway would have to remain unfinished another decade, and the streetcars still kept getting congested. After war, transit took a definitive backseat to the automobile, and highways were sliced through cities all over America, especially in neighborhoods with more minorities. Many surface streetcar lines were replaced with diesel buses instead of a costly grade separation, requiring less infrastructure for lower capacity. When the privately owned streetcar companies were unable to raise the fares enough to keep up with the suddenly declining demand, the operation of the Metropolitan subway was taken over by the Washington Regional Transit Authority and Baltimore streetcars by the Maryland-Baltimore Transit Authority. However, just as streetcars had been the victims of their own success, so too were highways. With more vehicles on the road, rush hour traffic grew unbearable, worse than any traffic jam of trolleys, and as it became apparent that adding more lanes to the highway only made it worse, it was only a few short years before commuters were begging for any alternative. And the commuters in Washington are some of the most important people in America. The New Haven Railroad invented the Park and Ride station in 1953 to solve this problem, and Metro was back in full swing to build them where lines crossed major highways, such as at Huntington on the new subway line to Alexandria. The last highways were constructed in the late 1960s, and few have been widened beyond 6 lanes since then, because one more lane never fixed traffic forever. Chapter 5. Flight. Another post-war development was air travel, and the Metro was well situated to take advantage of it. The state of Maryland acquired land for a large new airport in Linthicum, but the WB&A main line bisected it through the middle. Rather than abandon it, grade separation was dug underneath the runways and a station was installed at the airport terminal. Baltimore Friendship Airport opened in 1950, and it had invented the airport rail link, and it was a massive success. Thereafter, a rail link would be a standard feature of any airport, and work began immediately on one to National Airport. It opened on April 11, 1954, and it was connected to a Pennsylvania Railroad branch line from Roslyn until it could take over the old highway bridge to 14th Street. Construction also began on Dulles Airport in the fields of Loudon, and upon the airport's opening in 1962, the branch line built to bring construction materials from the W&OD was repurposed to bring passengers. A few months later, the Inter-Airport Express service debuted between Dulles and National, running new high-speed rail cars equipped with luggage racks. Chapter 6. Modernization. The 60s and 70s were a time of big changes for the Washington region and its metro. Certainly the biggest change came on July 4, 1976, when the District of Columbia was admitted to the Union as the 51st state, its borders defined by the original boundary stones. Columbia's state capital is Washington, its governor is also the mayor of Washington, and the other counties with riverine borders are Alexandria, Arlington, Anacostia, and Georgetown. These counties have limited autonomy and function similar to New York's boroughs. Other than that, the Maryland-Baltimore Transit Authority extended the standard gauge Annapolis line from the old subway to the northwestern suburbs, and repurposed the broad gauge Guilford Avenue elevated for part of another metro line. But the full details of the Baltimore Metro is its own subject for a much longer history book than this one. The last surface streetcar lines in Washington were discontinued in 1986, with the Eckington trolley being replaced with part of a metro line to Langley Park, Maryland. Metro expansion in the quarter-century post-statehood was characterized by big suburban extensions such as that. One restored the old interurban line from Bethesda to Rockville, and then took it even further north. Another extended the Knock line to Annandale. A major feature of metro expansion in the 21st century has been de-interlining. Because so many branches go through the original trunk line, a disabled train will delay every branch. To that end, a new east-west subway under Constitution Ave is currently under construction to disconnect the North Capitol Street subway from its infamous acute angle turn at Union Station, which was designed for short streetcars rather than the massive trains of today. It is hated by passengers for its loud screeching and by the maintenance shops for wearing out train wheels, and it won't be missed. Conclusion. The Washington Metro, combined with its neighbor Baltimore, make America's strangest and most unique metro system. Originally a subway surface trolley with high-speed interurbans with an intercity commuter rail, and transit experts debate endlessly if such a rail network even counts as a real metro if mainline freight trains can run on its tracks. I think it would. Many writers of alternate history like to imagine what could have been by asking what if a war had gone the other way. With the Washington Metropolitan Subway, I have demonstrated that changing even something as small as how Washingtonians get to the airport can affect the course of American history too. I believe this is the good ending compared to what we got in OTL. Thank you for riding the Metro, and long live the secret DC streetcar. The end. And it seems like perfect timing, as the trolley ride has returned. Perfect timing, I just finished my book. How was the ride?
Not quite done, but very good.
Book took exactly 10 minutes to read, just as you arrived.